Hi, my name is Würsching, and today I am presenting our work FIDO to the Rescue: Platform versus Roaming Authentication on Smartphones. This is a joint work of me and my co-first author Florentin Putz, together with Steffen Haesler and Matthias Hollick. FIDO2 is a passwordless authentication method supported by all major web browsers. It uses public key cryptography to authenticate users based on challenges that can only be solved with the user's private key. There are two variants of FIDO2 with fundamentally different user interactions. On the one hand, there's platform authentication where the private key is securely stored within the smartphone, and the user only has to confirm the authentication with their fingerprint. Then, there's roaming authentication, where the private key is embedded in an external security key that the user has to bring close to the smartphone. In this work, we study FIDO2 on smartphones, comparing Apple's Touch ID for the web as a platform authenticator and the YubiKey, YubiKey 5C NFC as a roaming authenticator. Our focus is on the following research questions. Firstly, comparing FIDO2's usability and acceptance using roaming and platform authentication. Secondly, collecting the strengths and weaknesses of both variants, and finally, studying how users make adoption decisions for specific account types. To this end, we have conducted a lab study, and I will present our study design next. We've recruited participants within and without our university using email lists, social media, and snowball sampling. Our target group was participants over 18 with diverse backgrounds, especially non-experts. We've recruited 87 participants, out of which 37% are female. Our study sample is between 18 and 69 years old, reporting various fields of work or study. We decided for a between groups design to identify differences between platform and roaming authentication on smartphones. Therefore, we randomly distributed participants into two groups. In the experiment, Group P used platform authentication and Group R used roaming authentication. Before the experiment, we educated participants to minimize the influence of prior knowledge. Then, the participants used FIDO2 in the experiment before filling in a questionnaire. To get all participants on the same level, we showed them instructional videos and answered remaining questions. During the experiment, the participants used their variant of FIDO2 to register and log into a mock-up website that we've prepared for the study. Our questionnaire contained the system usability scale, von der Leyen's acceptance scale, and an adoption metric. Additionally, we included open-ended text questions collecting the strengths and weaknesses of the presented authentication method, as well as the participants' general impression and adoption reasons. Regarding demographics, we collected our participants' age, education, gender, and their field of work or study. As control variables, we measured the participants' affinity for technology interaction, their privacy concerns, and whether they are familiar with iOS, and selected two-factor authentication methods. We used a combination of quantitative and qualitative categories to answer our research questions about the usability and acceptance of FIDO2, its strengths and weaknesses, and the participants' adoption decisions. Okay, let's discuss our findings, starting with research question 1. For usability, we measured the system usability scale, finding that on smartphones the usability of platform and roaming authentication is similarly high. For acceptance, we measured von der Leyen's acceptance scale, finding that the acceptance is higher for platform authentication. Next, we will have a closer look at the strengths and weaknesses identified by each group to better classify these findings. First of all, a few strengths have been mentioned by participants of both groups. Most find FIDO2 to be secure and easy. Others mention that FIDO2 eliminates typical password issues such as memorization or password resets. Additionally, participants of the platform authentication group mention speed as a strength, as well as the fact that the authenticator is always with you. The only exclusive roaming authentication strength indicated in our study is that a single authenticator can be used for many accounts. Both groups mention account recovery and authenticator revocation as a weakness of FIDO2. The obvious weakness of platform authentication is that it cannot be used to authenticate on other devices. Additionally, participants of Group P report issues with the fingerprint sensor and general mistrust against using biometric authentication. On the other hand, most participants of Group R are concerned about potentially losing the YubiKey or it being stolen or destroyed. Furthermore, users have to purchase the YubiKey and carry it with them at all times. For research question 2, we find that weaknesses of platform authentication are addressable while the weaknesses of roaming authentication are by design. After learning about the pros and cons of platform and roaming authentication, we wanted to dig deeper, so we asked our participants for which account types they would adopt the presented authentication method and why. We analyzed their responses and found some interesting patterns regarding our third research question. Group P describes that they would adopt platform authentication for frequently used accounts where the advantages, availability, and speed are especially relevant. However, a few participants of Group P would not use platform authentication for sensitive accounts, citing mistrust in the security of FIDO2. In contrast, the participants of the roaming authentication group would generally not use roaming authentication for frequently used accounts. However, they would adopt roaming authentication for sensitive accounts, describing that in this case, the security benefits justify the need to carry the YubiKey. Overall, we find that users do not decide whether or not to adopt FIDO2 for all of their accounts. Instead, they make a decision per account type, individually weighing the pros and cons of the authentication method. What are the implications of our work? Summarizing the answers to our research questions, we found that while the usability of both variants is similarly high, there is higher acceptance for platform authentication. Both variants have strengths and weaknesses, and users make adoption decisions per account type. So, who will win the battle of platform versus roaming authentication on smartphones? Let's see. To win more users for platform authentication, we propose better education on how platform authentication, FIDO2, and public key-based authentication in general work. The other major weakness is that Touch ID for the web cannot be used on other devices. However, Apple has since released passkeys, which is very similar to Touch ID for the web but synchronizes the user's private keys securely across their devices. As a result, passkeys address this weakness of platform authentication. The main issues of roaming authentication are by design. Roaming authenticators like the YubiKey will always be a piece of hardware that has to be carried and can be lost, destroyed, or stolen. Solving these issues is very hard, even though there is promising related work on using smartphones as roaming authenticators. For these reasons, we argue that there is more potential in platform authentication than in roaming authentication, so future work should focus on solving the issues of platform authentication. To facilitate future work, we provide a replication package with our evaluation scripts and the dataset collected in our study. We also release our mock-up website source code.